Matt Schaff and Jared Small of DraftSharks.com here, and we're ready to talk some fantasy football rankings. We've mentioned on here before that you can find the projections for 2025 up on our site. That means rankings, of course, are available across formats. They've been up for more than a month now, and they've already gotten a significant refresh after the early rounds of free agency. So plenty of changes in there. Teams kind of firming up the view, but we have lots left to do. I mean, the NFL draft is still to come. Plenty of offseason work and reports to react to, figure out guys that are bound for larger roles than we thought and maybe smaller roles than we thought, injuries, of course. Plus, we still got some in-staff discussion about the players that we like higher or lower. We're going to focus on that in-staff stuff today, though, bringing some of our behind-the-scenes discussion to you, our listeners and viewers. First, let's talk a little bit about the process. Jared goes team by team, does the projections. His track record speaks for itself. Multiple accuracy awards that date back to before I was even on the Draft Sharks staff. Most recently, the multi-year accuracy award from Fantasy Pros. So Jared's in charge of those initial numbers. Anybody who's on Twitter like, Jared, where do I find your rankings? They're on Draft Sharks. Once Jared puts those projections in, I politely let Jared know which players he got wrong, because that's bound to happen with all the players that you're projecting. And then every once in a while, I'm able to convince him to shift the guy. More often, we just go back and forth until one of us is like, all right, you guys, tell us where we're resting this player so we can move on to the next thing. Is that pretty accurate, Jared?
Yeah, that's how it goes. And honestly, it's a big reason why I think our rankings have been so good, because we do go through this process on all of these teams, all of these players. Definitely a team effort. With the projections, it's kind of the baseline. But as we talk about and as we try to illustrate with our floor and ceiling projections, the one single baseline projection is just one snapshot of what we think might be most likely for a guy. But we know all these guys have ranges, some bigger than others, some more to the upside, some more to the downside. So I think going through this process as a team and really diving into these guys is why I think our rankings have been so good for so long.
And I think all the different elements that we put into it makes it even easier to figure out whether you should be arguing a player or not. Like, early on, we could look at the rankings that come out and be like, I don't like this guy way down here. I think he belongs up here. But now, we've got all the target projections, we've got ceiling, we've got floor. So rather than just look at the rankings and I say, that doesn't feel right, I think this guy should be up here, I look into the numbers and I'm like, maybe I don't like that guy as much as I thought I did, or maybe he does belong in that spot. Or I might be like, nah, this category or these two categories, I think we're a little light. I think we're a little heavy. I think this is where we should shift, and then see where he comes out at the end of that. So we're going to talk about some of those players that, when I went and looked at the initial projections, these are the guys that stuck out to me that I would change something about. We're going to hit on those key disagreement points. We don't have anybody else besides me and Jared, so we're probably not going to settle anything on the show. We're just going to, argue it out, and then you can decide what you think about these players and see how they settle in our rankings going forward. Fair warning, I got about 3.5 hours of sleep last night with a sick kid. So I'm going to try to stay rational, but I can't promise anything.
I wouldn't expect anything less out of you.
Let's start at quarterback. And honestly, let me start by saying, going through, I was hoping to find more players to argue about than I did. It's a little easier that only a few came out, including no running backs. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. We're going to start at quarterback, though. And honestly, the first player is somebody that I expected to have to argue a little bit, especially once his team got a new coach. It's Bears quarterback Caleb Williams. He's 11th in our rankings by 3D value. That's right where he is in the best ball market right now. To me, Jared, that's more of where he could finish the season as opposed to where I think he belongs. So why don't you first give me the case for Caleb Williams at QB 11?
And I almost want to push Caleb Williams higher after what we've seen that the Bears do over these last few weeks in free agency. We're definitely doing some projecting here to get Williams where he is, right? But I do think you've got to be willing to project second-year players to take leaps often, and I'm comfortable doing that with Caleb Williams. This is a very high-end prospect, number 1 overall pick in last year's draft. Our aging curves, by the way, just looking at rookies in general, they say you should, on average, produce about 80 to 85% of their peak in year 1. That jumps to 90% in year 2. So, we do see if these quarterbacks take leaps from year 1 to year 2 in general. I think we're going to see that with Caleb Williams. Again, this offseason has been very, very kind to Caleb. Of course, we got the coaching change, going from Shane Waldron to Ben Johnson. Really tough to come up with, I think, a bigger coaching upgrade than that, right? I mean, we just saw what Ben Johnson did with the Lions. Top 5 the Lions were in both points and total yards in all 3 seasons under Ben Johnson. And then they go to free agency / the trade market and really, I think, upgrade the interior of the offensive line, which was obviously a big problem for the Bears last year. They add guards Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson. They sign center Drew Dahlman. So I'm not an O-line expert, but I think, those 3 guys are established starters in the NFL, which at least I think is an upgrade over what the Bears were trotting out there on the offensive line last year. So all good things for Caleb. He obviously has things he needs to improve as a player heading into year 2. I think the big one is all the sacks he took last year, 68 sacks. And part of that was on the O-line. A lot of that was on Caleb, though. He was 33rd among 34 qualifying quarterbacks in pressure to sack ratio. So he was not good at avoiding sacks when he was pressured. He needs to improve that. He needs to improve as a deep passer. He was 30th or worse in completion rate, adjusted completion rate, and PFF passing grade on deep passes. But we did see him do some good stuff. For starters, he was much better on intermediate and short throws last year. He was 10th in completion rate, 5th in adjusted completion rate on those shorter throws. And he ran, which is big for fantasy. 489 rushing yards last year for Caleb Williams. That was 7th most among quarterbacks. So I think you're going to get the rushing. I think you're going to get improvement as a passer with a better coaching staff, with what is still a strong group of pass catchers in Chicago. And again, I just believe in the talent, and I think Caleb Williams does take that leap in year 2.
I can certainly agree that the upside's there, that the talent's there. A year ago, he was being talked about like this special quarterback prospect. And, he's a year in, so we'll see exactly where that goes. It was not a very good year. I know that there were some flashing points, but overall, he didn't perform well. I think that we and the draft market are giving a little bit too much of a bump for Ben Johnson this year. Like, yeah, he just did some excellent stuff in Detroit. He's also about to be a head coach for the first time. We don't know how that's going to treat him. He might struggle to balance offense with head coaching. We also don't know his effect on this offense. We've only seen him work in the Detroit offense. So it looks like a positive, but I don't know that we can necessarily say it's definitely going to boost the Chicago offense. My bigger issue with Caleb Williams, though, is where he sits versus the rest of the position. We talked on our previous show about if you're targeting a quarterback in that QB 11 range, around there, you want somebody that you think has like top 6 upside. You don't want to draft at QB 11, the guy that you think is going to finish 11th. By our numbers right now, Caleb Williams is 14th in base projection. He's just behind Justin Herbert, just behind Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy, narrowly ahead of Dak Prescott and Jared Goff. So, tightly bunched with those guys by that base projection. Ceiling, however, I think is where we're a little too friendly on him right now. He's ahead of Herbert. He's ahead of Nix. He's more than a point per game ahead of Drake May, Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, and even further ahead of Purdy, Dak, and Jared Goff. So can he do all of that? It's possible. And if he were going like QB 14, 15 in best ball drafts right now, I'd say, yeah, I want to get some Caleb Williams and we'll see what happens. But I think the market is already baking in the upside. I think we're already baking in the upside. I think it's too much heading into fantasy football drafts. I think he should be outside the top 12, somebody that you get in a 2 QB system and then see what happens as opposed to somebody that you target. I will say that, because we have him right about the same place the market does, I don't think he's going to pop as a draft target for us, but I still think he should be lower.
I've started working on our first perfect draft, round by round strategy guide that's going to go up later this week, I think. And Caleb Williams has not popped as like suggested pick very often. I think the market is pricing Caleb correctly at this point. I don't, he's not someone I'm avoiding at the cost, but he's not someone that I think is, a big time value at cost. I do think he has top 8, top 6. You can kind of argue exactly where the upside goes. But again, with the rushing ability that he showed last year and something that he did in college as well, on top of the high-end talent as a passer with all these upgrades to the O-line coaching staff, I do think, it would not surprise me if we look back at the end of the year and he finishes quarterback 6 or quarterback 7, somewhere in that territory.
I'll wait another 3 rounds or so and take Drake May instead.
Hey, I like Drake May, so no argument there.
The other quarterback that I picked out here it feels a bit nitpicky because he's not high. He's like quarterback 19, 20, depending on which version of the rankings you're looking at, which format you're playing in. Basically tied in 3D value with Jordan Love. It's JJ McCarthy of the Vikings. Total fantasy points, though, we have him nearly tied with Drake May, ahead of Tua Tagovailoa, CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, and Trevor Lawrence by double digits in total fantasy points. So, Jared, what about JJ McCarthy puts him up there for you?
Yeah, for me with McCarthy, it starts with the situation, which it kind of has to, right? Because we have not seen this guy play in the NFL yet. But, this Kevin O'Connell-led Vikings offense with these weapons, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson back now totally healthy. You look at this O'Connell offense in his 3 years in Minnesota so far. Here's where the Vikings have ranked in passing yards under O'Connell: 6th, 5th, and 6th. Ranks in passing touchdowns: 4th, 4th, and 5th. Then if you look at just where the Vikings have ranked in total quarterback points as a team in O'Connell's 3 seasons: 5th, 5th, and 9th. Now, of course, you had Kirk Cousins for the first year and a half of O'Connell, but then it was Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs for the second half of 2023. And then it was Sam Darnold last year, who everyone had totally left for dead. He finished quarterback 7 in this offense. So to me, that's the argument for JJ McCarthy. If Sam Darnold can finish quarterback 7, we're not ranking McCarthy that high. There's a chance that he's just as good, if not better, than Sam Darnold. I don't see, why his upside doesn't extend into the top 12, which is why I like him as that quarterback 2 target. I think he beats a lot of those guys in that range in ceiling.
He's ultimately one that, if we're having our usual staff discussion and you come back with that and other guys are like, yeah, I like JJ McCarthy, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I'm not going to argue too hard on a guy in the QB 19-20 range. I have a hard time liking him better than Trevor Lawrence or taking him ahead of Dak Prescott. And we don't have him ranked ahead of Dak Prescott, but just in terms of making decisions in a draft, I'm going to lean toward the other guys in that range, but I get what you're saying about him. I think we have him projected favorably in terms of pass attempts. We've got him tied for the 10th most projected pass attempts, which, if he is the week 1 starter, maybe that ends up being fair. Passing yards per game, 12th in the league right now by our projections, 12th in touchdown passes. Touchdown rate that we have him at would have ranked 12th in the league last year. To me, it's all just, it's a little bit friendly for a guy who missed his entire rookie season because of a knee injury and is basically going to be a rookie heading into this year. So mildly friendly, not somebody that's going to be a sticking point for me, I would say.
And again, a lot of those, yards per game and passing touchdown rate, those are like even below what O'Connell's offense has produced on average over the last 3 years. So my other note on McCarthy too is I think he's going to bring some rushing ability too. 742 yards and 8 touchdowns over his final 2 college seasons. Ran a sub 4.6 40 at his pro day heading into last year. So I think he's someone who, could give you 300 or so rushing yards this season.
Yeah, and we're probably also going to have to watch him because we were told by reporters that the Vikings were trying to bring Sam Darnold back, tried to keep Daniel Jones around. Both of those guys left for starting gigs. So we're going to have to see. Like, obviously, Minnesota wants JJ McCarthy to be the guy, but they're also not like, yeah, he's totally ready to be the guy right now.
Yep, as they should not be that sure at this point.
Running back, like I said, guys didn't really jump out to me here. So I think it's more interesting to look at what we have and maybe how we would draft it versus what we have, Jared. So who is a running back that you like better than our current PPR rankings at the position?
Tank Bigsby for me. I've come all the way back around on Tank Bigsby after kind of being the low guy on him since the pre-draft process. But he's one of those guys that's tough to get high in the PPR rankings because it's tough to give him big pass catching projections because he hasn't done it in the NFL. And I honestly don't think he's going to do it this year. I think Travis Etienne is pretty safe as the lead pass catching back this year. I still like Bigsby though, even higher than we have him ranked. The new front office in Jacksonville and the new coaching staff, there's no allegiance anymore to Travis Etienne as the former first rounder. So I think it really should be a true open competition for carries in this backfield. And Tank Bigsby, by pretty much any metric you look at, was a better runner than Travis Etienne last year. Bigsby beat Etienne last year in yards per carry, rush yards over expected per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, PFF rushing grade. Bigsby was better than Etienne in all those metrics. So if that continues into 2025, I don't see much of a reason why, Bigsby shouldn't lead this backfield in carries. I think the running game is going to get better under Liam Cohen. I know we don't have a huge history from him, but he was obviously there in Tampa last year for Bucky Irving's big season. Cohen he comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree, and we've seen that offense in general produce big rushing numbers. So I just like this Jags running game in general. I think Travis Etienne is a decent target as well, but Tank Bigsby is going quite a bit later in draft. So I think he's my favorite target in the backfield.
Yeah, my biggest sticking point with Jacksonville running backs right now is they could draft one anywhere. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they were one of those teams that took a first round running back.
Yep.
We obviously can't plan right now as though they're taking a first round running back. So it could go either way. And I think we've said before, like, where Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne are going, even if they do take an early running back, somebody in rounds 1, 2, or 3, I think they're still going at fine spots, even with that possibility.
Yeah, I mean, Bigsby's basically going in a range where you can almost consider him a handcuff, and he's like still a fine player again. I think he's going to be more than that.
Breece Hall, we have at RB12 in our half PPR ranks. That's actually 2 spots below where he is in best ball ADP, RB10, which ours is driven by underdog drafts. I would rather be above market a little bit, or at least at market, than below on Breece Hall. And, it seems like nitpicky because it's 2 spots difference, but it's in that range where that could be enough that the draft war room just says, yeah, don't draft this guy. He just doesn't pop among the recommendations. I would be scared to treat Breece Hall that way. And I understand that the argument against him is last year, first off, and now Justin Fields is his quarterback, who probably isn't good for either his target share or his rushing touchdowns. Probably going to take some of that away from him. My argument against that is Breece Hall is really good. He was very good the year before last, coming off an ACL tear. And I don't know exactly what the future looks like. So I think that he has, if all things go right, I think he has the physical upside and the workload upside to challenge for the top spot at running back. I don't know how to draw that up projections wise right now, but I want to make sure that I'm not left out if he does have this season that's just, significantly better than what the market says it will be.
Yeah, I think a month and a half ago, Breece Hall was like one of my favorite targets in drafts at any position. Now I've cooled on him a little. A lot of it is the Justin Fields thing, like you said, Matt. Our carry projection on Hall even went up a little bit, but the targets come down just because the pass rate in New York we projected quite a bit lower once Fields arrived as a likely starter. The pass catching efficiency probably comes down a little bit. The Fields signing knocked Hall down a couple spots in the rankings. The other thing is just looking into his 2024, a lot of his even blocking independent metrics were down from where they had been, which is a little worrisome. I think it's more of a one-off. This is still, like you said, Matt, a really talented running back in the prime of his career still. I think Hall's going to bounce back from that perspective. So I'm with you, and I still like him, even though we're behind ADP. I still like Hall as a round 3 target. He could easily be someone who returns more like late round 1 level production. So still a target for me. We'll look at the projection, see if we can maybe get him up a little higher, because I definitely don't want him to be a fade for Draft Sharks insiders.
This Jets offense right now seems like one that might just turn out to be slightly underrated by the market versus the upside on the players, whether it be Fields, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. I'll be curious to ride this one out, because a couple years ago we thought that Justin Fields was bad for DJ Moore in Chicago. It ended up being a very good season for DJ Moore. So sometimes it's a matter of saying, I don't know how it's going to work, but I want to bet on it working. On the other side, who is a running back that you're not drafting as high as our rankings would say to?
I could pretty much say any running back going outside the first 2 rounds right now, because this rookie running back class is just super deep. There are running backs that are going to go on day 3 that I think are going to make immediate impacts and really, impact these veterans. So I honestly am kind of scared when it comes to drafting any of these, round 4, 5, 6 running backs in drafts right now. I'm really trying to avoid that range in these early basketball drafts I'm doing. The one guy I'll pick out in particular is Tyrone Tracy, who's going in round 6. I mean, we were as high as anyone on Tracy coming into the league last year. Just a super interesting prospect, former wide receiver, obviously has the pass catching ability, had a better rookie season than I think we could have even hoped. I'm still concerned though, just that he's going to get flat out replaced, or just that the Giants are going to add someone to maybe even just come in and be the primary ball carrier and put Tracy back into more of a pass catching role. If you look at Tracy's advanced metrics last year, he wasn't that great. 47 running backs with 90 plus carries last year. He was 35th in both yards after contact per attempt and PFF rushing grade. Even as a pass catcher, he was 35th among 37 qualifying running backs in PFF receiving grade. Now, again, this is a former wide receiver who I think does have room to grow, should be getting better still. But I just don't think Tracy, or really any of those guys at that level, are safe right now with this rookie running back class that's about to hit the league.
He's a near total avoid for me. I'm not sure that I have drafted Tyrone Tracy at all. And it's not because I think he sucks, but because I don't know what the Giants' plans for him are going to be. He certainly might emerge as the backfield touch leader, on the other side of the draft. He also, like you said, might have to split work, might have somebody come in who's working ahead of him. I think all of those possibilities are well within reach, and I'm not scared that I'm going to miss out on anything special. So I agree. No Tyrone Tracy for me. Earlier in the draft, I have not been taking much Josh Jacobs at RB8 by our half PPR rankings. He's RB9 in best ball ADP. So we're basically at market on Josh Jacobs' value. If you look at our ADP market index, it's actually a 0. So it shows, when you put all the positions together, we're valuing him right where the market is. The things that worry me about Josh Jacobs, last year went really well for him. And, that sounds weird as a thing that worries you, but
Mhm.
Like, it went about as well as it could have in terms of things falling in line for him. Career highs in rushing touchdowns and total touchdowns for Josh Jacobs last season. Green Bay itself scored the most rushing touchdowns per game that it has since 1964. So the whole team is probably going to score fewer rushing touchdowns this next year. You know, whether that is the run game not being as good, whether it's the passing game being better because the passing game really fell off last year, either of those factors could bring that number down. We also saw no regular RB2 in the Green Bay offense last year, primarily because of that Marshawn Lloyd injury. Some other guys factored in, but nobody was like the clear RB2 taking on a significant amount of work. And we've seen a lot of significant RB2s in Matt LaFleur's history. Like, that starts with him as the Titans OC back in the season where he started out Deion Lewis working ahead of Derrick Henry. He has favored having two running backs, and he's said as much. He even said as much before last season when we were in training camp time. Aaron Jones in 5 years with Matt LaFleur in Green Bay averaged 13.2 carries per game. Josh Jacobs averaged 17.7 carries per game last year. Now, the fact that Green Bay booted Aaron Jones before last season and then threw a bunch of money at Josh Jacobs tells me that Green Bay wants to work Josh Jacobs harder and thinks he can hold up to it more than Aaron Jones can. Maybe they continue working him at the same level this year. I would think that they would like to bring it down at least a little bit from there. And of course, luck goes into staying healthy enough to being able to work that much. So you have to also factor in the chance of injury when a guy is getting that many touches. And just all told, if we're talking about Josh Jacobs going around the 2-3 turn, I'd rather take a different running back or a wide receiver in that range.
It does feel like everything went right for Josh Jacobs last year, including the fact that Green Bay just ended up being as run heavy as they were. I mean, that was tough to see coming. They were one of the 3 run heaviest teams in the NFL. We're not projecting that again this year, projecting more of a lean towards the pass. And really, I could see them even passing more than we currently have him projected for, which would hurt Josh Jacobs. The other concern for me with Jacobs would be the fact that he did get up over 300 total carries just in the regular season last year, then also had the playoffs. Last time he did that was 2022. And then the following year in Vegas, he just completely fell off a cliff and just had a horrible year efficiency wise. So, it's kind of interested to see how he rebounds off such a, workhorsey season for the Packers last year.
You can see where Josh Jacobs pops in your draft war room, or if he doesn't. The draft war room is available to sync right now if you're doing best ball drafts. I have it synced with my latest FFPC slow draft for their early tournament. The live draft sync will work whether you're doing slow or fast. It adjusts player values for the best ball format. It marks stacking options as you draft, so you don't accidentally overlook somebody that you could be stacking with a teammate that you already have. So sync it for your next best ball draft. Check it out. Get some help as you draft those teams. Wide receiver, Jared, I'm going to start with Xavier Worthy for the Chiefs. I was hoping that he was going to come in lower in our rankings because I think that he has been overrated by the draft market. And you really let me down by rating him even higher than the best ball ADP does. He's wide receiver 16 in our half PPR and full PPR rankings right now. He's wide receiver 20 in best ball ADP. What's the case for Xavier Worthy up there?
Talented player, first round pick who made that late season jump like we saw from Rashee Rice the previous year in Kansas City. You look, Worthy was a fantasy disappointment for the first half of last season, but you look at the final 7 regular season games, 7.9 targets per game on a 20% target share. Worthy was wide receiver 24 in PPR points per game over that span. If you cut it down to just the last 3 games for Worthy in the regular season, 10.3 targets per game on a 26% target share. He was wide receiver 11 in PPR points per game over that span. And then, of course, he goes for 287 yards and 3 touchdowns in 3 playoff games. So, really strong final 10 games for Xavier Worthy, obviously capable of taking another step forward in 2025, his second season. I will say, with Worthy, and the big question in Kansas City is obviously Rashee Rice, both coming off the knee injury and with a potential suspension. We right now have Rice, I believe it's projected to miss the first 5 games this season, might even be the first 6 on suspension. That's boosting Xavier Worthy because we have his target share quite a bit higher in those 6 games without Rashee Rice. So that's part of the reason he comes in so high. We'll see what happens with Rice if his suspension is shorter, if the knee rehab goes well, that could lower Xavier Worthy, because I do think Rashee Rice is still the target leader when he's healthy for the Chiefs. But, I think there's a good chance he's not available for the start of the season.
That's the thing that worries me the most about betting on Xavier Worthy so high is it's a challenging target distribution there. Not only did we lose Rashee Rice early in that season, we basically had no Hollywood Brown. I mean, I know he showed up late in the year, but he was basically out the entire season with that shoulder injury. They did sign him last offseason. They signed him again this offseason. So he's around. We should figure he's going to be at least healthier than that. So we've got Rice, we've got Brown, we've got Travis Kelce still around. He wasn't great last year, probably declining as players tend to do when they're 48 years old, like Travis Kelce is, but he's still there to get some targets. So I'm just worried about betting on Xavier Worthy getting the target share to support as high a finish as where he's being drafted right now with all those factors. The more specific items where I think that we have him overrated, I think his catch rate's a little bit too high because I think once they have all those pieces in place, they try to work some more of that downfield stuff to Worthy, which didn't really work out last year, but he and his quarterback are both well cut out for it. And it's just lower percentage kind of stuff. It's bound to bring your catch rate down a bit if you're working downfield further. I think we're too friendly with him on our ceiling projection. He's 15th among wide receivers in ceiling points per game right now, ahead of Jackson Smith and Jigba, ahead of DJ Moore, and I think too far ahead of Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Chris Olave. To me, those guys are more like the range where he belongs. Waddle, Devontae Smith, Chris Olave. I don't see Xavier Worthy sitting on that cusp of wide receiver 1 territory.
Yeah, that's fair. And the target depth point you made is super interesting for a couple of reasons. One, when Worthy had that strong stretch to close the season, I'm not going to say he was in the Rashee Rice role, but he was, doing similar stuff where a lot of the stuff was, short passes, catch and run for Worthy. So it'll be interesting just to see how the Chiefs deploy Worthy and Rice when they're on the field together this season. And the other thing with the deep balls, there is a lot of meat on the bone for Worthy on those deep balls with Mahomes. Because last year, and if you watched him or had Worthy on your fantasy team, this. He only caught 3 of 17 targets, 20 plus yards downfield. Mahomes and Worthy just could not connect deep. I expect that to improve. I think he's going to connect on more of those deep shots in 2025, which will obviously help the fantasy production.
If he was like wide receiver 25 with the upside to finish wide receiver 16, I'm on board. But if I have to buy him at that price, I'm wary. Zay Flowers, on the other hand, is somebody that I want to be in on. He is wide receiver 26 in our half PPR rankings as we speak, wide receiver 27 in PPR, wide receiver 24 in best ball ADP. So we're below market on him. We've got him 26th among wide receivers in projected targets, which is obviously, one shortfall for him. He did tie for 20th in targets at the position last season. So we've got him a little bit below that bar. Zay Flowers, to me, Jared, is a similar case to Breece Hall, where I just want to bet on the overall profile. I'm not sure that he's going to get a bunch more targets, that he's going to score more touchdowns all of a sudden. I just know that the number one receiver, who's been excellent through his first 2 seasons and plays with Lamar Jackson, who has also been excellent and had a very good passing year last year. I want to bet on that receiver, making it happen somehow. I talked before about how we have all of these measures and numbers to look into to see if it really does work or if I'm just building somebody up in my mind and it doesn't track. I think where we're low is that touchdown rate. 6.4% is where we have it projected. It makes sense versus what he did the past 2 years, 6.5% in 2023, 5.4% in 2024. But we know that touchdowns can spike and drop, and it's just not really a sticky stat. So I would start by projecting a bit more touchdown luck for Zay Flowers as the number one wide receiver for a good quarterback in a good offense. I think that would help him a little bit. He was also 15th in the league in target share last year. So obviously that doesn't help you as much when your offense is running a ton. But Baltimore last year had their lowest pass rate since 2020. They had the second lowest pass rate in the league ahead of only Philadelphia. And those were also the 2 lowest pass rates of the past 2 seasons. So I think that number is coming up at least some. If, we get like a Derrick Henry injury, it could come way up. But I think those factors make me want to at least be in at market price on Zay Flowers. And I like the young player enough where I want to be a smidge above market, make sure I get some Zay Flowers.
I like the player a lot, and he made a nice jump from year 1 to year 2. His target share climbed from 23.2% to 25.6%. His average target depth was up. His yards per catch was up. His yards per route run was up. So it's all good for Zay Flowers. I'm with you. I like the player. And to me, I think the Breece Hall comparison half works. It works in that is a good young player who you want to be in on. I totally agree with that. To me, though, Hall has the chance for the volume to match that talent. I don't think Zay Flowers has as good a chance to, get the type of usage you would need for him to really pay off. It would probably take a Derrick Henry injury for this offense to really shift towards the pass. Again, Zay Flowers already at a 25.5% target share last year. How much can that grow? I'm not sure, with Mark Andrews looking like he's going to be back, Isaiah Likely back, they add DeAndre Hopkins, Rashad Bateman back. Like the personnel is pretty much the same in Baltimore heading into this season. So even with the 25.5% target share last year, Zay Flowers, 7.1 targets per game, as you said, 20th in total targets. That's nice. He also played all 17 games. That bumped him up the target ranking. Even with that volume, he was 38th among wide receivers in expected fantasy points per game and 36th in actual PPR points per game. So we already have him projected ahead of, both his usage and actual production last year. So he is a tricky player. Like he is not someone I want to be low on because I think he's good. But I just think it's a tough situation for him to, outproduce his current price.
I agree. It's a tough one to project to the point where I want him to be, but I do think in his case, it's close enough. Well, like if he were going in Xavier Worthy area, then I'd be like, guess I can't be in on Zay Flowers this year. But at that bottom of wide receiver 2 territory, I think he does ultimately have the upside to challenge that top 15.
Agreed.
The last wide receiver that I'm going to bring up is, somebody that I kind of uncomfortably bring up. It's Jerry Jeudy. He's wide receiver 35 by both our half PPR and full PPR rankings. I can't say that I'm excited to draft Jerry Jeudy. And I think this is one where I look at the numbers and I'm like, I just think that we're underrating him at least some. And I think we and the market overall are both doing that because he's right in the same range in best ball ADP. It's not like we're below where the market is. I think he deserves a bit more target share in the projection. 24th league wide in target share after Amari Cooper left the team last year, 5th in yardage share, also just 32nd in targets per route. Now, that could be a signal that he got a little lucky and he didn't earn those targets per route. It could also be a signal of the bad quarterback play that he had to put up with all year that we know was part of Cleveland. Maybe they did a bad job of targeting him as much as they should have based on how he performed in those other metrics. So like I said, we have him projected right around where his ADP is right now. He's wide receiver 34 in underdog drafts. I might feel differently about Jerry Jeudy after the NFL draft. And he's not one where I'm pounding the table saying we've got to get him to wide receiver 28. But every time I'm in a draft, and I think it comes up even more so for where to target receiver as opposed to where to go after Jerry Jeudy, he looks to me like a guy in the range where he's going that we could all look back at the end of the year and be like, why did we ignore how well the second half of 2024 went for him and just stick him at the bottom of wide receiver 3 range?
Yeah, definitely possible. I'm in wait and see mode with Jeudy and what happens in the NFL draft, right? Because I think if you look at the state of the Browns right now, and you would have to project Jerry Jeudy for 25+% target share. But as with a lot of our projections in mid-March before the NFL draft, we don't have the Browns projected for 100% of targets. We're leaving gaps because we expect them to add something. So I'm curious to see what the Browns add in the draft. We have Jeudy projected for a 21.5% target share right now. Here are his target shares by year as a pro, starting as a rookie in 2020, 20.3%, 18.5, 19.4, 17.7, and then 21.5 last year in total. Again, that did rise after Amari Cooper left. But so we haven't projected to match a career high in target shares. That's where I feel comfortable with right now, assuming they add something significant. If they don't, we are by default going to be boosting Jeudy's target share. He will climb the rankings. So he's definitely a wait and see guy. Of course, we're also waiting to see who the Browns quarterback will be. That's a pretty big deal for Jeudy as well. So lots of moving pieces for his value at this point. He's someone that I'll take if he's there at ADP and top of our rankings, but I'm not aggressively targeting him at this point.
Yeah, I would have to say the same thing. He's a guy that if we were doing our rankings meeting and I brought him up and I was like, I think we should boost this thing a little bit. And everybody else was like, nah, I wouldn't be like, no, you guys, we really need to do this. I'd be like, all right, yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's certainly not somebody that I'm excited to go after, but we'll see. I rested on picking a guy like that because like I said, There weren't more guys that jumped out to me as ones that I wanted to strongly argue. I found nobody at tight end worth arguing. The next wide receiver that I thought about picking out was way down in the 60s, and I was like, that one doesn't matter. So I got to say, good job overall, Jared. You've finally learned how to do this projections thing pretty well.
We're starting to get this mind meld thing the longer we've done this together, which I guess is good. I do like when we disagree, but I'm also happy to hear that you like the tight end rankings as the tight end ranker champion of the world at this point. So that was good to hear.
Yeah, I was like, there's got to be a tight end somewhere, and then I looked through, and it's like, guys like Jake Ferguson that I want to like higher than the market does. You've got him higher. Pat Freiermuth is higher than the market has him. Like, sweet, that's what I was looking for. So, like I said, I looked through, and I was like, nope, I'm good with all these, and I'm good with how they're going to perform in the draft war room.
Love it.
We will keep making updates as needed to the projections that drive our rankings, and that projection system that we've been talking about is what allows you to customize those rankings to fit your specific format. And the draft war room adds factors specific to your draft, best ball or otherwise, to give you the best fantasy football drafting tool that you'll find anywhere. Check it all out now at draftsharks.com, your unfair advantage.